The morning sun painted the desert sky orange when Apacha first saw her. He was riding his horse along the river that ran through his small ranch in Arizona territory. The year was 1885, and life on the frontier was never easy for anyone, especially for a half-Apache man trying to make an honest living. Apacha stopped his horse when he heard the sound. It was not the usual noise of the flowing water or desert animals. This was different. A deep, painful moaning that seemed to come from the rocks near the riverbank. He climbed down from his horse and walked carefully toward the sound. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about the world. Behind a large boulder lay a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was Apache. He could tell from her features and the traditional clothing she wore. But she was enormous, easily 8 feet tall, maybe more. Her long black hair was matted with blood, and deep wounds covered her arms and legs. She was unconscious, breathing slowly and heavily. Apacha had heard stories from the old people about giant Apache warriors from ancient times. His grandmother used to tell tales around the fire about the tall ones who lived in the mountains before the white men came. He had always thought they were just stories meant to entertain children on cold nights. But here was proof lying before him. The woman's wounds were serious. Someone had shot her multiple times, and she had lost a lot of blood. Apacha knew he should probably ride away and pretend he never saw anything. Getting involved with something like this could bring nothing but trouble. Instead, he found himself kneeling beside her, checking her pulse. It was weak, but steady. She was fighting to live. Apacha was not a large man himself, standing only about 5 feet 6 inches tall. Moving this giant woman would be nearly impossible alone, but he could not leave her there to die. Something deep inside him, maybe the Apache blood from his mother's side, would not let him walk away from someone who needed help. He rode his horse back to his small cabin as fast as he could. The cabin sat on a piece of land he had bought with money saved from working as a scout for the army. It was not much, just a few rooms and a barn, but it was his home. Apacha gathered everything he could think of: ropes, blankets, his medicine bag with herbs his grandmother had taught him to use, and clean water. He also grabbed his rifle, not knowing who might have shot the woman, or if they would come back looking for her. When he returned to the river, the woman was still unconscious. Working as carefully as he could, Apacha cleaned her wounds with water from the river. The bullets had gone through her arms and legs but had missed anything vital. She was hurt badly, but she would live if he could get her somewhere safe. The hardest part was moving her. Even with ropes and his horse helping, it took him almost 2 hours to get her back to his cabin. He made a bed for her in his barn, thinking it would be easier to hide her there if anyone came looking. For 3 days, Apacha cared for the giant woman. He brought her water and tried to get her to drink. He changed the bandages on her wounds and used the healing plants his grandmother had taught him about. He talked to her in Apache, telling her she was safe now, even though he was not sure she could hear him. On the 4th morning, she opened her eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with intelligence and pain. When she saw Apacha sitting beside her, she tried to sit up quickly, but fell back down with a groan. "Do not move," Apacha said in Apache. "You are hurt badly." She stared at him for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was deep and strong, even though she was weak from her injuries. "Why did you help me?" she asked. It was a simple question, but Apacha found it hard to answer. He thought about it while he brought her some water. "My grandmother always said that when the spirits put someone in your path who needs help, you help them," he finally said. She said that is what makes us human. The woman drank the water slowly. "What is your name?" she asked. "Apacha," he said. "And you?" "Ayana," she replied. "It means eternal blossom." Over the next few days, as Ayana grew stronger, she told Apacha her story. She was indeed one of the tall ones, descendants of an ancient Apache tribe that had lived in the mountains for hundreds of years. Her people were few now, maybe only 50 or 60 left in the world. She had come down from the mountains looking for her younger brother, who had been captured by white settlers 3 months ago. The settlers had been taking Apache children and selling them to work on farms far away from their families. "I followed their trail for many weeks," Ayana explained. "I was close to finding them when a group of soldiers saw me. They tried to capture me, but I fought them off. That is when I was shot. Apacha understood why the soldiers had shot her. To them, she would have seemed like a monster or a demon. Fear made people do terrible things. Did you find your brother? Apacha asked. Ayana's face grew sad. No. The trail went cold after the fight with the soldiers. He could be anywhere now. Apacha felt sorry for her. He knew what it was like to lose family. His own parents had died when he was young, killed in a raid by white settlers who thought all Apache were dangerous. As the days passed, Ayana grew stronger. She was able to sit up and eat the food Apacha brought her. She was amazed by his kindness. Most people, even other Apache, were afraid of her people because of their size. "You are not afraid of me," she observed one evening as Apacha changed the bandages on her arm. "Should I be?" he asked. "Many are. Even my own people sometimes fear those of us who grew tall. They think we are cursed or touched by dark spirits." Apacha shook his head. "My grandmother told me that the spirits make all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. She said the tall ones were made to be protectors, to watch over the rest of us." Ayana smiled for the first time since he had found her. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and less fearsome. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," she said. "Yes, she was. I wish I could have learned more from her before she died." They talked long into the night about their families, their lives, and the changes happening in the territory. The white settlers were coming in larger numbers every year. The old ways were disappearing, and both Apache and white people were struggling to find ways to live together. Apache told Ayana about his ranch and his dreams of raising cattle and horses. He wanted to prove that Apache people could be successful in the new world without giving up everything that made them who they were. Ayana told him about her people's hidden village in the mountains, where they tried to live as their ancestors had for generations. But it was getting harder every year. Game was becoming scarce, and young people like her brother were curious about the world beyond the mountains. "Maybe that curiosity is what got him captured," she said sadly. After a week, Ayana was strong enough to walk around the barn. Her wounds were healing well, and her strength was returning quickly. Apacha was amazed by how fast she recovered. It seemed like her size gave her more than just height and strength. It also gave her the ability to heal faster than normal people. But with her recovery came a new problem. Ayana was getting restless. She wanted to continue looking for her brother, but she had no idea where to start. "The trail is cold," she said one morning. "It has been too long. How will I ever find him now?" Apacha had been thinking about this problem too. He had an idea, but he was not sure if Ayana would accept his help. "I know people," he said carefully. "People who might have information about missing Apache children. If you want, I could ask around." Quietly. Ayana looked at him with surprise. "You would do that?" "Why?" "Because it is right, and because—" Apacha paused, not sure how to explain the feelings that had grown in his heart over the past week. "Because I want to help you." There was something else he wanted to say, but he was not ready for those words yet. In just 1 week, this giant woman had become important to him in ways he did not fully understand. That night, as they sat outside the barn looking at the stars, Ayana told Apacha more about her brother. "His name is Nalnish," she said. "He is 16 years old and very curious about everything. Our father died when he was young, so I have been like a mother to him. When he disappeared, it felt like my heart was torn out." Apacha understood that feeling. Family was everything to Apache people. "We will find him," he promised. The next morning, Apacha rode into town to begin asking questions. He knew it was dangerous for Ayana to stay alone at his ranch, but she was still not strong enough for a long journey. In town, he spoke carefully with people he trusted. He told them he was looking for information about missing Apache children, but he did not mention Ayana or explain why he needed to know. What he learned made his blood run cold. There was a man named Morrison who lived about 50 miles south. Morrison had a reputation for taking Apache children and selling them to work on farms and ranches throughout the territory. He claimed he was helping them by giving them work and teaching them white ways, but everyone knew he was just making money from their suffering. Even worse, Apache learned that Morrison had a group of men who worked for him. They would capture Apache children during raids and bring them to Morrison's ranch. From there, the children would disappear, sold to people who needed workers. When Apache returned to his ranch that evening, he found Ayanna pacing back and forth in the barn like a caged mountain lion. "What did you learn?" she asked immediately. Apache told her about Morrison and his operation. As he spoke, he watched Ayanna's face change. Her eyes grew dark and dangerous, and her hands clenched into fists. "This Morrison," she said in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. "Where does he live?" "Ayanna, listen to me," Apache said. "I know what you are thinking. But you cannot just go there and take him. He has many men with guns. And if you hurt him, every soldier in the territory will come after you." "Then what do you suggest?" she asked. "We need a plan, a careful plan." They stayed up most of the night talking about what to do. Apache had an idea that might work, but it would be dangerous for both of them. "I could go to Morrison's ranch pretending to be interested in buying workers," he said. "If your brother is there, I might be able to see him. Then, we could figure out a way to get him out." Ayanna did not like the idea of Apache putting himself in danger for her family, but she could not think of a better plan. "If something happens to you because you tried to help me," she said, "I will never forgive myself." "Nothing will happen to me," Apache said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The next day, Apache prepared for his journey to Morrison's ranch. He put on his best clothes and tried to look like a man with money to spend. He told Ayanna to stay hidden in the barn and not to come out for any reason while he was gone. "If I am not back in 3 days," he said, "ride north to the mountains and find your people. Tell them what happened." "I will not leave without you," Ayanna said firmly. Looking into her eyes, Apache realized that somewhere during the past 10 days, something had changed between them. What had started as simple kindness had grown into something deeper and more complicated. "Be careful," she said, placing her large hand gently on his face. "I will," he promised. As Apache rode south toward Morrison's ranch, he did not know that Ayanna's rescue was already bringing trouble to his door. 20 miles away, a group of territorial soldiers had been tracking the giant woman for weeks. They had found the place where she had been shot and had followed the signs to Apache's ranch. Now they were making camp, planning their attack. By dawn the next day, 300 armed warriors would surround Apache's property. But none of that had happened yet. For now, there was just a man riding south to help a friend find her lost brother, not knowing that his simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would change everything. Morrison's ranch sprawled across a valley like a small town. Apache counted at least 30 buildings as he rode down the dusty road toward the main house. Corrals held hundreds of cattle and horses, and armed men patrolled the property on horseback. The ranch was bigger and more heavily guarded than Apache had expected. This was not just a cattle operation. This was a fortress. A tall man with a gray beard met him at the main gate. The man wore a gun on his hip and had the hard eyes of someone who had seen too much violence. "What do you want here?" the man asked. "I am looking for Mr. Morrison," Apache said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I heard he might have workers for sale." The man studied Apache for a long moment. "What kind of work you need done?" "I have a ranch about 50 miles north. I need help with cattle and horses." "Morrison don't usually sell to Indians," the man said. Apache had expected this. He pulled out a bag of silver coins he had been saving for months. "I pay good money. Silver. Not paper." The sight of the silver changed the man's attitude immediately. "Well, I guess money is money. Come on." Morrison is in the main house. Morrison was a fat man with cold blue eyes and hands soft from never doing real work. He sat behind a large wooden desk in a room filled with expensive furniture. Everything about him screamed wealth, built on the suffering of others. "So you need workers," Morrison said after Apache explained his situation. "How many?" "Maybe 2 or 3 strong young men," Apache replied. Morrison smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "I got just the thing for you. Follow me." They walked to a group of buildings behind the main house. These were not like the other buildings on the ranch. They had bars on the windows and heavy locks on the doors. They looked like prisons. Morrison opened the door to one building, and Apache's heart nearly stopped. Inside were about 20 Apache children, ranging in age from maybe 10 to 18 years old. They were dirty and thin, and their eyes held the empty look of people who had given up hope. "Take your pick," Morrison said casually, as if he were selling horses. Apache forced himself to look carefully at each face, searching for Ayana's brother. In the back corner, he saw a young man who looked like he could be related to Ayana. He was tall for his age and had the same strong features and intelligent eyes. "That one," Apache said, pointing to the young man. "Nalnish," Morrison said. "Good choice. He is strong and learns quick. Only been here 2 months, so he ain't broken in yet, but you can fix that." Hearing the name confirmed it. This was Ayana's brother. "How much?" Apache asked. $50 silver. It was more money than Apache had, but he nodded anyway. "I will take him. But first, I want to make sure he is healthy. Can I speak with him?" Morrison looked suspicious. "Why you want to talk to him?" "I want to make sure he speaks English. If he is going to work for me, he needs to understand orders." Morrison thought about this and nodded. "Make it quick." Apache approached Nalnish carefully. The young man watched him with wary eyes, probably wondering if this stranger was going to be better or worse than Morrison. "Do you speak English?" Apache asked loudly enough for Morrison to hear. "Yes," Nalnish replied quietly. "Good," Apache said. Then, in Apache, he whispered very quietly, "Your sister, Ayana, is safe. I am going to get you out of here." Nalnish's eyes widened, but he was smart enough not to react obviously. He just nodded, as if he understood the English instruction. "He will do," Apache told Morrison. But when they went back to the main house to complete the sale, Apache ran into a problem. Morrison wanted to see the money before he would release Nalnish. "Let me see them $50 silver," Morrison said. Apache only had about $30 with him. He had hoped to negotiate the price down, but Morrison seemed firm on his amount. "I have $40 with me now," Apache said. "I can bring the rest tomorrow." Morrison's eyes grew hard. "I don't do business that way. You got the money, or you don't," Apache thought quickly. "What if I leave my horse as collateral? It is worth at least $20. Morrison looked at Apache's horse through the window. It was a good horse, well-trained and strong. "All right," he said. $40 and the horse. But if you try to cheat me, my men will hunt you down and kill you both." "I understand," Apache said. The transaction was completed, and Nalnish was brought to him. The young man had been given a clean shirt and pants, but he still looked like he had been through hell. As they walked away from the ranch, Apache worried about how they would get away safely without a horse. It was 50 miles back to his ranch, and they would have to walk through dangerous territory, but Nalnish surprised him. "There is a place about 5 miles from here where my sister and I used to meet when we were children," he said. "Our grandfather built a shelter there for hunting trips. We could hide there until dark, then travel at night. It was a good plan." They reached the shelter just as the sun was setting. It was a small cave hidden behind rocks and trees, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. That night, as they shared the little food Apache had brought, Nalnish told him about life at Morrison's ranch. "They captured me when I was exploring near the white settlement," Nalnish said. "I was curious about their ways, and I got too close. Morrison's men grabbed me and brought me to the ranch." "What did they make you do there?" Apache asked. "Everything. We worked in the fields, cared for the animals, built fences. If we were too slow or made mistakes, they would beat us. Some of the children tried to escape, but Morrison's men always caught them and brought them back." Nalnish looked older than his 16 years. The experiences at Morrison's ranch had changed him from a curious boy into a hardened young man. "Morrison sells most of us to farms and ranches all over the territory," Nalnish continued. "I heard him talking about sending me to work on a cattle ranch in Texas next week. I thought I would never see my family again." "Your sister never stopped looking for you," Apache said. She was shot trying to track you down. That is how I found her. Ayana was shot? Nalnish's face filled with worry. She is healing well. She is strong, like you. They traveled mostly at night for the next 2 days, hiding during the day and moving carefully through the desert. Apacha knew this country well, and he guided them along paths that avoided the main roads. On the second night, as they were getting close to Apacha's ranch, Nalnish asked him a question that had been bothering him. Why did you help my sister? And why are you helping me? You do not even know us. Apacha had been asking himself the same question. At first, it was just because she needed help, and I could not leave someone to die. But now... He paused, not sure how to explain his feelings. Now, Nalnish prompted, now I care about what happens to both of you. Your sister is... special. I have never met anyone like her. Nalnish smiled for the first time since they had left Morrison's ranch. She likes you too. I can tell by the way you talk about her. Apacha felt his face grow warm. How can you tell that? Because she told me about you in my dreams. Apacha looked at him strangely. What do you mean? My people have abilities that others do not understand, Nalnish explained. Sometimes we can speak to each other across great distances, especially family members. Ayana has been visiting my dreams every night since I was captured. Last night, she told me that a kind man had saved her and was coming to help me. This was something Apacha had never heard of before. His grandmother had told him stories about Apache people with special gifts, but he had never met anyone who actually had them. Is that really possible? He asked. For my people, yes. The tall ones have always been able to do things that seem impossible to others. That is part of why some people fear us. As they got closer to Apache's ranch, both men became more alert. Something felt wrong. The usual sounds of the desert at night were missing. Even the insects seemed quieter than normal. Do you feel that? Nalnish whispered. Apacha nodded. He had learned to trust his instincts during his years as an army scout. Right now, those instincts were telling him that danger was near. They crept closer to the ranch buildings, staying low and moving from rock to rock. When they got close enough to see the barn where Ayana was hidden, Apacha's heart stopped. The barn was surrounded by soldiers. There were at least 50 men positioned around the building, all carrying rifles. They had lanterns and torches, and Apacha could see that they had the barn completely surrounded. They found her, he whispered. What do we do? Nalnish asked. Before Apacha could answer, a voice called out from near the barn. We know you are in there, the voice shouted. Come out with your hands up, and no one gets hurt. There was no response from the barn. You have until dawn to surrender, the voice continued. If you do not come out by then, we will burn the building down. Apacha counted the soldiers more carefully. There were definitely more than 50, maybe 70 or 80 men. This was not a small patrol. This was a major military operation. How did they find her? Nalnish wondered. Someone must have tracked her from where I found her by the river, Apacha said. Or maybe someone in town saw something and reported it. They watched from the rocks as more soldiers arrived throughout the night. By the time the sky began to lighten in the east, there were easily 300 armed men surrounding Apacha's property. 300 warriors, just as the title had promised. But these warriors were not Apache. They were United States soldiers, and they were here to capture or kill Ayana. We have to help her, Nalnish said. How? Apacha asked. There are 300 of them, and only 2 of us. My sister is not helpless. She has been fighting all her life, but she cannot fight that many men at once. Apacha thought about the woman he had cared for over the past 2 weeks. She was strong and brave, but she was also still healing from serious injuries. Even at full strength, she could not win against 300 soldiers. Maybe we can create a distraction, he suggested. Something to draw some of them away so she can escape. What kind of distraction? Before Apacha could answer, they heard a sound that made both men freeze. It was coming from the barn, a deep, loud roar that seemed to shake the ground beneath their feet. Ayana was not hiding anymore. The roar was followed by the sound of splintering wood as something large crashed through the barn wall. Ayana emerged from the barn like a force of nature. Even injured, she was magnificent and terrifying. She stood at least 8 feet tall, her long black hair flowing behind her like a war banner. She carried a spear she must have made from pieces of the barn, and her eyes burned with fury. The soldiers raised their rifles, but many of them seemed too shocked by her size and appearance to shoot immediately. "Fire!" an officer shouted. The sound of gunfire filled the air, but Ayanna was already moving. She was fast, faster than anyone her size should have been able to move. She rolled behind Apacha's cabin as bullets struck the ground where she had been standing. "Now," Apacha told Nalnish. While they are focused on her, the two men began moving through the rocks toward the back of the ranch, hoping to reach Ayanna and help her escape. But as they moved, Apacha realized something terrible. The soldiers had not just surrounded his barn. They had surrounded his entire property. There was no way out. Ayanna was trapped, and now he and Nalnish were trapped too. The battle for Apacha's ranch was about to begin, and he had no idea how any of them would survive what was coming. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the silence that followed, Apacha could hear his own heart pounding and the heavy breathing of soldiers who were trying to figure out what they were fighting. Colonel Mitchell, the officer in charge of the operation, had been tracking the giant Apache woman for 3 weeks. He had heard the reports from his men, who had fought her and survived, but seeing her in person was different from hearing stories. She was bigger than they had described, and there was something about her that made even experienced soldiers nervous. She moved like a warrior, and her eyes held intelligence that made it clear she was not just some wild animal to be hunted. "Cease fire," Mitchell shouted. "Hold your positions." He needed to think. His orders were to capture the giant Apache alive if possible. The territorial governor wanted to put her on display, to show people that the army could handle any threat. But looking at her now, Mitchell wondered if capture was even possible. Behind the cabin, Ayanna crouched in the shadows, checking her injuries. The gunfire had not hit her, but she could feel that some of her wounds from the previous fight had reopened. Blood was seeping through her clothing. She thought about the man who had saved her life. Apacha had shown her more kindness in 2 weeks than she had received from strangers in her entire life. Now his home was surrounded by soldiers because of her. She had heard the soldiers talking during the night. They were going to burn down the barn at dawn whether she surrendered or not. They wanted to make sure she had no place to hide. But Ayanna had no intention of surrendering. Her people had a saying, "Better to die fighting than to live in chains." She would rather die here, at the home of the man who had helped her, than be captured and put in a cage for people to stare at. What she did not know was that Apacha and her brother were hiding in the rocks less than 100 yards away. Apacha watched the soldiers through the gray light of dawn. They had formed a circle around his property, with men positioned every 20 feet. Some had rifles, others had pistols, and a few carried torches ready to set fire to the buildings. "We need to get closer," Nalnish whispered. "It is too dangerous," Apacha replied. "They will see us. My sister does not know we are here. If she thinks she is alone, she might do something desperate." Apacha understood what Nalnish meant. Ayanna might choose to fight all 300 soldiers rather than surrender. She was brave enough and proud enough to die fighting impossible odds. "What can we do against so many?" Apacha asked. Nalnish was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes lit up with an idea. "The horses," he said. "What about them?" "The soldiers' horses. They are all tied up together, about half a mile back down the road. If we could stampede them, it would create confusion. Some of the soldiers would have to go after their horses." It was not much of a plan, but it was better than nothing. Apacha nodded. "You go for the horses," he said. "I will try to get to Ayanna and tell her what is happening." "Be careful," Nalnish said. They separated, with Nalnish heading toward the horses and Apacha trying to find a way to reach his cabin without being seen by the soldiers. Meanwhile, Colonel Mitchell was getting impatient. Dawn was breaking over the desert, and his superiors expected results. "Apache woman," he called out. "I know you can hear me. Come out now, and I give you my word that you will not be harmed." From behind the cabin, Ayanna laughed. It was a sound without humor, full of bitterness and anger. "Your word?" she called back. Like the word your people gave when they promised to leave our lands alone? Like the word they gave when they said Apache children would be safe in their schools? Mitchell felt his face grow red. He was not responsible for every broken promise the government had made to the Apache people. But he knew she was right about one thing. His word probably meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want my people to be left alone. I want the children your people have stolen to be returned to their families. I want the soldiers to stop hunting us like animals." "I cannot give you those things," Mitchell said. "But if you surrender, I can promise you will be treated fairly." End quote. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad and tired. "There is no fairness for my people in your world, soldier. There never has been." While this conversation was happening, Nalnish had reached the soldiers' horses. There were over 200 animals tied to a long rope line. The horses were nervous because they could smell the tension in the air. Nalnish had grown up around horses and knew how to handle them. He moved quietly among the animals, untying ropes and removing hobbles. When he was ready, he picked up a large stick and gave a loud war cry. The sound spooked the horses, and they began running in all directions. Nalnish ran with them, shouting and waving his arms to keep them moving. Back at the ranch, the sound of stampeding horses could be heard clearly. About 50 soldiers turned to see what was happening. "Half of you, go get those horses," Mitchell ordered. "The rest stay in position." The distraction worked. With 50 soldiers gone, there were gaps in the circle around Apache's property. Apache used one of these gaps to make his way toward the cabin. He had almost reached the building when a soldier spotted him. "Hey!" the soldier shouted. "There is someone else here." Apache ran for the cabin as fast as he could. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet, but he made it to cover without being hit. "Apache!" Ayanna's voice was filled with surprise and worry. "Why did you come back?" "It is too dangerous. I found your brother," Apache said quickly. "He is safe. He is the one who stampeded the horses." Relief and joy flooded Ayanna's face. For a moment, she forgot about the soldiers surrounding them. "Nalnish is alive? He is really safe?" "Yes, but we need to figure out how to get all of us out of here." Ayanna looked at the soldiers surrounding them. Even with 50 men gone chasing horses, there were still at least 250 armed men between them and freedom. "There are too many," she said. "You should try to escape while you can. Take Nalnish and go north to the mountains." "I am not leaving without you," Apache said. "Why?" Ayanna asked. "Why are you willing to risk your life for someone like me?" It was the same question Nalnish had asked, and Apache still did not have a complete answer. But looking at Ayanna, surrounded by soldiers who wanted to capture her like an animal, he knew what was in his heart. "Because I love you," he said. The words surprised both of them. Apache had not planned to say them, especially not in the middle of a fight for their lives. But once they were spoken, he knew they were true. Ayanna stared at him for a long moment. In her eyes, he could see years of loneliness and pain, but also hope. "I love you too," she said quietly. Their moment was interrupted by Colonel Mitchell's voice. "Time is up," he called out. "Come out now, or we start shooting." "What do we do?" Apache asked. Before Ayanna could answer, they heard something that changed everything. From the desert around them came a sound like thunder. The sound of many horses running at full speed. But these were not the soldiers' horses that Nalnish had stampeded. These were different horses, carrying different riders. Apache warriors were coming over the hills from every direction. There were dozens of them, maybe 100 or more. They rode like the wind, their long hair flowing behind them, and their war cries filling the air. "My people," Ayanna whispered in amazement. Leading the charge was an Apache war chief Apache recognized from stories. It was Geronimo himself, the legendary leader who had been fighting the white soldiers for years. Behind him rode warriors from several different Apache tribes. Somehow, word had spread about Ayanna's capture, and the Apache people had come to help one of the tall ones. The soldiers were caught completely off guard. They had been focused on the cabin, not expecting an attack from outside. The Apache warriors hit their lines like a thunderstorm, riding through the circle and shooting arrows with deadly accuracy. "Attack from all sides!" Mitchell shouted, but his men were confused and scattered. In the chaos that followed, Ayanna made her move. She burst from behind the cabin and began fighting her way toward the Apache warriors. Her spear moved like lightning, knocking soldiers down without killing them. She was trying to escape, not start a war. Apacha stayed close to her, using a rifle he had grabbed to provide cover. He was not a warrior like the Apache riders, but he was determined to protect the woman he loved. The battle was fierce but short. The Apache warriors were outnumbered, but they had surprise on their side. They fought with the fury of people protecting their family, while the soldiers were just following orders. When it was over, more than half of the soldiers were down. Most were wounded rather than dead. The Apache warriors were skilled enough to disable their enemies without killing them all. Colonel Mitchell found himself facing Geronimo across the battlefield. The Apache leader sat on his horse like he was born there. His dark eyes filled with intelligence and strength. "You have lost this fight, soldier," Geronimo said in perfect English. "Take your men and go." "I have orders to capture that woman," Mitchell replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your orders mean nothing here," Geronimo said. "This is Apache land, and she is under our protection now." Mitchell looked around at his scattered, wounded men. He could probably call for reinforcements and continue the fight, but it would mean more death on both sides, and he was beginning to understand that this was not just about one giant Apache woman. This was about something much bigger. "If we leave," Mitchell said, "will you guarantee safe passage for my men?" "Take your wounded and go in peace," Geronimo said. "But do not come back here looking for fights with our people." As the soldiers gathered their wounded and began to retreat, Ayanna found herself surrounded by Apache warriors. Many of them stared at her in awe. She was a legend among their people, one of the few remaining tall ones. But Geronimo looked at her with concern. "Sister," he said, "you are hurt." "I will heal," Ayanna replied. "Thank you for coming. The spirits told us you needed help," Geronimo said. Word spread among all the tribes. When the tall ones are threatened, all Apache people respond. Apacha stood beside Ayanna, feeling out of place among the Apache warriors. These were men who had been fighting for their people's survival for years. What was he compared to them? But Geronimo noticed him and rode over. "You are the one who saved her," the war chief said. It was not a question. "Yes," Apacha replied. "You fought beside her today." "Yes." Geronimo studied Apacha for a long moment. "You have Apache blood?" "My mother was Apache. My father was Mexican." Geronimo nodded. "Your mother would be proud of you today. You have shown that blood means less than heart." As the day went on, the Apache warriors began to disperse. Some rode north to the mountains, others south toward Mexico. They had families and responsibilities to return to. But before Geronimo left, he spoke privately with Ayanna. "The mountains are always open to you, sister," he said. "Your people miss you." "I know," Ayanna replied. "But I think my place is here now." Geronimo's eyes moved to Apacha, who was helping some of the wounded soldiers. "With him?" "Yes. He is a good man. But the world will not be easy for you together. Many people will fear what they do not understand. We will face those challenges together," Ayanna said. Geronimo smiled. "Then you have my blessing. Live well, sister." As the sun set over the desert, Apacha, Ayanna, and Nalnish stood together looking at the ranch. Several of the buildings had been damaged in the fight, and it would take time to repair everything. "What will we do now?" Nalnish asked. "We rebuild," Apacha said. "We make this a place where all people can live in peace." "Even after what happened today?" Nalnish wondered. "The soldiers will probably come back." "Free," Apacha looked at Ayanna. "Maybe, but we will face whatever comes together." Ayanna took his hand in hers. Her hand was much larger than his, but it felt right. "Together," she agreed. In the months that followed, Apacha's ranch became something unique in the Arizona territory. Word spread about the man who had married a giant Apache woman, and about the place where different people could live and work together. Some Apache families came down from the mountains to work on the ranch. Some Mexican families crossed the border, looking for a new life. Even a few white families who were tired of the constant fighting came to help build something better. It was not easy. There were people who wanted to cause trouble, and there were government officials who did not like what Apache was trying to do. But the ranch survived and grew. Nalnish became like a brother to Apache. The young man used his knowledge of both Apache and white ways to help negotiate with different groups. He never forgot his time at Morrison's ranch, and he made sure that other stolen children were found and returned to their families. Morrison himself disappeared one night after several of his former captives paid him a visit. No one ever saw him again, but his ranch became a place where Apache children, who had been separated from their families, could come to be reunited with their relatives. Apache and Ayanna were married in a ceremony that combined Apache and Mexican traditions. Warriors from several tribes attended, along with neighbors from the surrounding ranches. Even some of the soldiers who had fought at the ranch came to the wedding, including Colonel Mitchell, who had become an unexpected ally. The ceremony took place at dawn, just as the sun was rising over the desert. As Apache and Ayanna exchanged vows, eagles circled overhead, and the mountains seemed to sing with approval. Years later, when people told stories about the giant Apache woman and the man who loved her, they always mentioned the dawn when 300 warriors rode in around his property. Some said they were soldiers, others claimed they were Apache fighters, but Apache knew the truth. On that morning, warriors from both sides had come together. Some fought for capture, others for freedom, but in the end, they had all been warriors fighting for what they believed in. The real victory had not been won by any army. It had been won by two people who chose to love each other despite their differences, and who built a life together that proved different people could live in harmony. Their ranch became a symbol of hope in a land torn by conflict. It showed that when people chose understanding over fear and love over hatred, anything was possible. And on quiet mornings, when the sun rose over the desert and painted the sky the color of hope, Apache and Ayanna would stand together and remember the dawn when their real lives began.